Welcome to the Multifamily 0 to 1 online meetup, where we discuss the best strategies to get started in apartment syndication.
Thank you so much for joining us. We've been doing this is our fourth episode now, and Junious is going to be our guest that we're going to be interviewing. So for the folks who haven't joined us before, this is really informal. The idea here is to focus on getting from 0 to 1, meaning getting to your first syndication. And we have a series of questions just to keep the conversation going. Martin and I will go over it, but feel free to jump in. It's very informal if you have any questions about syndication, how to get started. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that this is an educational presentation and we're not making any investment recommendation. You should always consult with your CPA and attorney for financial and legal advice. It's me, Marcelo Cazini. So my background is in IT and management experience. I have an MBA from Texas A&M. I'm certified PMP, project management professional. That's part of what I do for a living. I'm a member of the CCIM local organization here in Houston. I completed all the CCIM designation trainings. I'm a multifamily investor, and I also own my own commercial real estate. And prior to multifamily, I was also involved with single family and doing fix and flips. So, and again, thanks guys for joining. And I'll have Martin introduce himself.
Thank you. Yeah, Claudia couldn't join us today. She's traveling. Basically, she's working in Colombia, managing our assets. She had to go down there to evict a tenant from a farm. So she'll be back next week, hopefully. But in the meantime, it's just me. We have been in commercial real estate for a little bit over a year. We successfully finished our first syndication a couple of months ago. We're in the process of closing it in the next couple of weeks. We have invested passively in almost 500 units in different markets in Texas and Arkansas. And my background is on IT security. I've been an IT security consultant for almost 25 years, always managing businesses. And Claudia's background is very much related to real estate, both in Colombia and now here. Now she has an IROP certification from the National Apartment Association, and she works full-time doing real estate, commercial real estate here, and managing our assets in Colombia. That's pretty much it.
All right, thanks, Martin. So, Junious, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So, thanks you guys for having me this evening. So, professionally, I work in real estate development. I work for a home builder, a national home builder in Houston. And my role there is to analyze land deals and understand how to design them as a civil engineer, which is what my background was, and be able to put subdivisions on the ground. Before that, I worked for a development company in the Woodlands where we did land development and we did a big retail master, like a power center, retail center, with a lot of big box tenants like Academy and Kroger and TJ Maxx, Burlington, pretty much all the big guys you could possibly name. I was a single family investor since 2013. Like I kind of already said, I went to the University of Houston. I studied civil engineering. And then I went back to U of H to get an MBA with a focus in real estate. And I'm a licensed professional engineer. And the Urban Land Institute is like a global trade organization for development, and there's tons of different people that are involved with ULI, from lawyers to obviously developers, contractors, architects, engineers, surveyors, inspectors, appraisers, mortgage brokers, like whoever you want. Everybody's involved in commercial real estate development as a part of ULI, and I'm on their young leader committee.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Junious. So with that, we'll start with some questions we had prepared. And like I said, feel free to jump in, and if you guys have any questions, that's our goal. So Martin, do you want to get started?
Sure. So we have a basic structure on the questions. We try to get the same content from all our guests, but we can deviate at any time depending on what the guests tell us. All the stories are different and they have different value for everyone. So I think, Junious, if you can tell us a little bit what you were doing before you even started thinking about real estate or multifamily. What was the first step that got you into real estate in general?
The first thing that got me into real estate was I bought my house in 2012, and at that time we were still kind of coming out of the Great Recession, and I bought a foreclosure that was listed for $110,000, and then appraised for $130,000, and I was investing in the stock market for those 2 years leading up to that, and I made one transaction, and I made, or on paper anyway, my net worth went up $20,000 in one transaction, as opposed to putting money in the stock market and it was growing at 4 or 5% because the stock market really wasn't doing that well at the time. So that like really opened my eyes. Like, wow, I could just do one real estate transaction. I could make on paper, like I said, increase my net worth by that much. I need to do more research into that. So networked, talked to my realtor. She was like, yeah, I'm not really, a real estate investor realtor, but you should go and meet with these guys at a company called Lifestyles Unlimited, which is very prominent in Houston. They help single family and multifamily investors. And when I went to their events and went to their mentorship, it was like everything, it seemed like multifamily was just a step too far. So I started in single family. Like I said, a year after I bought my house, I made my first rental property investment, and then I got up to 3 single family houses. What made me really switch to multifamily was a number of things. One of them was like I said, I was working for another company before the company I work for now, and I'd worked there for 2 years, going to school at night, driving to the Woodlands, driving all the way to the University of Houston, which is right outside of downtown. So it was like an hour drive to the Woodlands, hour drive to school, 30-minute drive home, just grinding it out, working 55-hour weeks when I wasn't going to school. I would stay late and work. And after 2 years, I got a promotion, I got a raise, and I thought all was great with the world. And then 3 months later, they fired me. And I was like, man, that's rough. But that's like the axe that's always there. Like you can't, if you work for somebody else, it's always up to them. Even if you're doing the best job you can, something may be going on above you, something may be going on behind you, maybe my situation. And they just decided to let me go. And I remember like driving home that day and thinking like, man, like how am I going to piece together this like financial situation that I have? And then I thought about like single family properties. And I was like, well, I have these are supposed to be my passive income. I'm supposed to be making enough money. So eventually I would be able to live off of them. At least that was the goal. And I just realized like I would have to get 30 or 40 single family houses before I could get, enough passive income from those. And the 30 or 40 houses that could take, I don't know, it might have taken, 10, 20 years. I don't know. It was going to take too long, I thought. So I really started just networking and trying to meet more people that were successful, that had successfully retired from, their corporate jobs or choosing to work because they have enough passive income or however that was situated. And I just started meeting a lot of multifamily investors that were in multiple deals. Either they were syndicating or they were passive investors. I went to a meetup outside the Galleria that was hosted by, what were the name? The Dillons. And I think they've actually transitioned from multifamily into retail now, but they were still doing a multifamily meetup in the Galleria area. And the second thing that really sold me on multifamily and like the whole like community that we're a part of was I went to the meetup. Like I said, I was about to finish. I was still in graduate school, so I was taking all the real estate finance classes at U of H, and everything that like this community was doing was being taught to me, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday at night by people that work in commercial real estate and work in these big firms that built City Center and built downtown and built the Galleria. And I was like, man, you got folks that some of them work, some of them don't work, but they were able to just succeed financial success doing the same things I was learning in graduate school. And when I went to go get my MBA, I was thinking, well, I'll work for one of these companies. And then like 10 years from now, you know, with their connections and with their help, I'll be able to launch my own investment company, which in reality was probably, they would never help me launch my own investment company. And I would have to do it on my own. So just meeting that community, seeing what they were doing, the sophistication with what they were underwriting their deals. I mean, everything was like top class. And I was like, man, I want to be a part of this community. And I've learned so much from, you know, folks that are on this call, and, you know, just continuing to try and contribute to the community.
That's great. And that's how, and at what point did you think of, hey, I really think I'd like to be a syndicator, I'd like to be a sponsor versus just maybe being a passive investor? I mean, when did you make that connection to being a syndicator?
I thought so. The other thing that happened while I was a single family investor was I did start telling like my friends and family about what I was doing, and they wanted to invest with me, but I couldn't. Single family's tough to partner, to bring people in, because it's not like you could set up an LLC, but like the financing's in your personal name. So then you have a partner that's not signing on the loan, and that it's just like a weird, single family's just not set up. So I was actually like turning people away that wanted to invest in me just because I didn't have the right vehicle. So that was one thing. So I thought I had like investor demand, that if I had something where they could actually invest, they would. So I thought that was number one. Number two was, you know, all the stuff I was learning in school, getting my MBA with obviously with focus in real estate. So I thought I had some, you know, level of education. And then probably just starting to talk to people about understanding what it took to be a syndicator and how much money you had to have up front, you know, to put earnest money, to do due diligence, to have a loan application, to have legal, to have all those things, and like getting that answer and knowing what that was, and knowing that if I sold all my single family houses, I would have enough money to be able to tie up a deal, do all the legal paperwork the right way, you know, hire the mortgage broker and, you know, stroke the check for the loan app, to be able to do all that just to get open. And then once you're able to open for business, then it was like, okay, now it's being able to raise the money, obviously, which is, you know, very, very big deal.
And did you end up, like you mentioned, you had a full-time job, family. Did you have to make any changes to your life, financially, your routines? I mean, at one point you're probably having to start underwriting deals, look for deals. How did you manage the work life and being a syndicator now? What changes have you made?
There's not a lot of balance, I would say. There's not a lot of free time. I think the biggest adjustment was like attending all of the meetings. Most of the events happen at night, obviously, because most people work, and then attending the events like during the weekend. And, you know, I know a lot of us are Sun Rockers, so we all venture to Dallas maybe once every 2 months or every other month, depending on how often he has events. That was a big transition. As you guys saw, I have a 14-month-old, so my son was born September of last year. We formally joined the group in November, so 2 months after that. So it was like work, then it was like being a dad and like learning how all that works, and like my wife probably being mad at me, but supporting the dream. And then, you know, sacrificing, really like her sacrifice to allow me to go to Dallas and allow me to go out at night, because she's home with the baby, and my wife's a teacher, so she's, you know, dealing with fourth graders running around all day, and then she comes home and she deals with, you know, a growing infant into a toddler now. You know, it was like I had a job at night, and, you know, being a mom is that's a full-time job as well. So that was the biggest thing, and having being on the same page and having that communication to say, hey, I think this is what's best for like our financial future. And, just a sacrifice for both of us, I think. She doesn't think of it like like I sacrificed, but I think I sacrificed. I'm going to Dallas, that was a sacrifice. Driving,
I know.
rush hour traffic,
4 hours on the car.
go to meetings and stuff, and it's a sacrifice. Obviously, I went home with the baby, but
Absolutely. So you mentioned this organization that you joined. You also had your MBA. Did you feel like any other, when you're now just focusing your education on syndication, what kind of vehicles did you look for education in terms of learning the business?
Just like with everything, school doesn't teach you everything. Just with education, they teach you, by the book, but then like doing it in the real world is like completely different, right? So, like you kind of already mentioned, joining a mentorship group, you almost get like a blueprint, and you have other people that are executing the blueprint that are probably, 4 or 5 steps ahead of you. And you're able to reach out to them and ask them for advice and say, hey, I had this. Hey, how'd you do that? You just closed this big deal. How'd you do that? How'd you get involved in that? So, education like I got in school was great, but nobody at the school was saying, hey, Junious, you need to fill out an LOI like this, or, hey, I can submit, my underwriting to, the coaches that we have. And they say, well, how'd you get these rents? Occupancy is not going to be that high. You're going to have some turnover at the property. Your exit cap rate's too high. Like I couldn't submit my underwriting to, my professors in business school. So the mentorship program definitely just like took me by the hand and showed me like, okay, these are the things you need to do. You're on the right path, but these are the things that you can look out for. And, learning from other people's mistakes is better than making your own mistakes.
Cool. So on that path to getting to your first syndication, I think most people have said the biggest, I'll say, strategy is to put together your team, right? So in your specific case, what was your strategy for putting together that team of lenders, brokers, partners, investors, everyone around you? What did you do first? Well, how did you do it?
The first thing I did was I talked to my business partner, who's Rico, right there on the call. Didn't know he was going to be joining, so that's pretty cool. We were in business school together. We took like all the same classes. We were in all the same classes. You all get broken up into groups, into teams, and Rico and I were pretty much in all the same teams. So we just had kind of a chemistry, and he's a mortgage broker now. So underwriting, I was like, oh, okay, well that's something that you could do. Because that's what you do every single day. The biggest thing is obviously when you're a first-time syndicator, a lot of people just don't take you seriously, just because everybody in real estate works on commission, including my buddy Rico. The mortgage brokers, the listing broker, the property management companies, like they all work on commission, and they all work for you only if the deal closes. So before I was able to find, basically before I found Robert Lopes, who's the owner of Relic Realty, it was tough to get a lot of people to spend the time for us to adequately analyze and underwrite a deal. So when we met Robert, who we met through Rico, him coming on board, him being experienced syndicator, he was in another program before he joined Brad's. But having him like walk us through the steps as well and tell us like, hey, no, that's not how this works. You need to do this, or just giving us obviously advice and from an operational standpoint on what he thought rents could be, what he thought he could operate the property at. He had his own mortgage broker that he was working on with some other deals, so we were able just to kind of fall in under his umbrella. We used, lawyers from Brad's group that I got from Mike Hardage, who was our coach on this deal. So just really, kind of being in the game and teaming up with the right people. Listing brokers started to take us a little more seriously, And then obviously the mortgage broker was already kind of came with Robert, so we kind of had the full team there.
Okay, cool. So once you had the team and you were looking for that first property, what was your basic criteria? What type of market were you looking for? Which location, size, all of that?
We're definitely looking greater Houston area, mainly because that's where Robert operates out of. So we definitely want to lean on his experience as a property manager. One of the things that Rico and I did in business school was every year, Bauer, which is the College of Business at U of H, they do a symposium on real estate innovation every single year. And our year, when we were going through the class, it was all multifamily. And so we analyzed a lot of multifamily developments, and we looked at what the common trend was and what these guys are building, $30-50 million deals. And the main component that all of their deals had was live, work, play. They all either they built it into their development where they had retail or a restaurant or an office building or something, or they positioned themselves, or they went after sites that were close to other employment centers or transportation. So those were the same things that, well, they're doing it on this like this huge scale. Well, a lot of those values and a lot of those tendencies will definitely work at what we were trying to do. So we always, we call it the Starbucks test. Like how close is the target property to a Starbucks? Because if a Starbucks is there, nobody does more market research than retailers. Nobody does more market research than Starbucks. So Starbucks is there, probably pretty good area, probably pretty good sub-market. So we look for transportation, visibility off of a major thoroughfare or a major freeway. Ideally, that makes it very easy to market your property. That way people don't have to come down some, back street. It's like you're right there on Main Street. So you're right there out in the open. The other test we look for is grocery store. How close are you to one or two grocery stores? Ideally two. I think about where I live, there's actually 3 grocery stores before I even get to the freeway, whether I go out left out of my neighborhood or right out of my neighborhood. So I think subconsciously that was something that we took note of when we bought our house. I think that's something that residents think of when they choose where they're going to live. I think those were the main things. Retail, and restaurants. How close are they to restaurants or bars or coffee shops, or kind of like the happening place in that area? Where do people go to hang out? That contributes a lot to how people live, and where people go to have a good time. And they come home from work and then they want to go to a coffee shop or wherever, just to have it's called like the third place where people congregate and hang out, and it's just a part of their lifestyle. So those were the kind of the things that we tried to look at.
Just think, one day Starbucks is gonna be like, Junious and Rico just bought an apartment here. We go.
Yeah, I'm sure they're paying attention to us. The other thing, so I went to a meetup, maybe it was 2 months ago now. A guy named Eric Barvin was speaking, and he says when he looked at markets and submarkets, he looked at if Amazon wanted to relocate, where would they relocate in this submarket? What things would they look for? And high education, high household income, good transportation, educated workforce, things like that. Those are things we try to keep in mind as well. I mean, to find where Amazon would relocate is going to probably push us into properties that we couldn't afford, but it's something that that stuck in my head.
Well, it needs to be Amazon friendly and landlord friendly, right? Because Amazon is in Seattle. I don't want to go there. Okay.
That's a whole another conversation. I'm not part of that conversation.
Okay. So when you were looking for that first property, how many deals or how many properties did you actually on the road took a look at, went to tours? How much of an effort was that?
We really started looking in November of last year, and we put our first deal under contract at the end of May. at varying levels of intensity. Depends on what you mean by look at. I mean, we looked at like 100, right? You can go on LoopNet or Crexy and you can look at hundreds. I would say we analyzed probably 50, just to like understand how all the underwriting would work. And we still needed like coaching too. So we would underwrite it, submit it to the coach, and he's just like, it was like he would get it back with like a bunch of red ink. It was like, no, all these answers are wrong. Like, no, you're overestimating this. Where's the CoStar report to back that up? Your exit cap's too ambitious. Like, no. So going through like the first 30 were probably just like, yeah, we had no business. We weren't even in the ballpark on those because we didn't know what we were doing. We started to kind of hit our stride maybe in April or so. Mind you, it's me and Rico's underwriting deals as well. So we had kind of a two-headed monster. So between the two of us, those were kind of the amount of deals we were looking at. And then we got in a best and final maybe in March, and we lost, thankfully. And then we got in another one and then we got into two in April, and then we lost those obviously. And then we got, best and final on the deal that we ended up getting in May, and we took that one down. So, and the other thing is we started to we were really broad at first, which isn't ideal, and they tell you not to do that, but we did it anyway. Really, like once we decided, okay, we're looking at greater Houston area, and we're looking at 70. Oh man, I could get my dog then. You're looking at between 70 units and like 90 units. We thought we were comfortable there because the price point was like $5 to $7 million, and we knew how much money we had in the bank, so we knew how much money we could be able to put down for earnest money, and all the other due diligence items. So once we said, okay, we're only looking at deals $6 million to $8 million, and that could be 60 units to 90 units. We really honed in and we said, okay, deals of this side are trading at this price in Houston, and we know that because we lost a bunch of deals. So we knew what stuff was trading for. We knew how much it costs to operate. If you look at deals the same size and this iterative process with Robert, we know, okay, that's one on-site person, full-time person, and that's maybe a porter that comes in intermittently. So we knew how much that cost, and we had that plug number from Robert. We started to know like what utilities would cost, contract services, repairs. I mean, all the other expenses. We knew for a property this size, this age, this price point, we felt comfortable the expenses would be X amount per door. And so we were really, we started to become experts at looking at deals that size. So that helped when we got an email from a broker saying, hey, we got this deal. It's just like, oh, how many 150 units? Like, nah, no thanks. Like, not even worth. We're not even going to open up the OM. We're not going to call the broker. We're not going to waste anybody's time. Not sending it to Robert so he can, have his staff look at it. Like, okay, that doesn't meet the criteria. We're on to the next deal.
And was there anything in particular about that first deal that made you think that, hey, this is the one that we really wanted, this is the one we're going to go for it? I know you mentioned a few best and finals, but was there anything in particular about that deal, or was just another deal that the numbers worked?
I think it was two things. One is that, like I said, Rico works for Marcus & Millichap, and he sees the listing broker on an almost daily basis, I guess, whenever Rico goes in the office. So we felt like we had a strong relationship there. We had bid on other Marcus & Millichap stuff and not gotten it, so Rico's swing didn't really help us on the other deals. But I like that we had a familiarity with a broker that Rico sees on a daily basis, and we knew his process because we had bid on some of his other deals. The other thing we liked is that this property was actually originally listed with another real estate broker. So Rico was underwriting this deal in January, and for whatever reason, that broker ended up losing the listing. And then when it came back with Marcus & Millichap, they sent out an email blast, and it's like 30 days, 45 days, submit your offer. It could be another week to a best and final. So if folks that were just looking at it for the first time, like they had 30 days, we were looking at it in January. So we had 5 months or 4 months anyway, to prepare an offer. So that was the second thing we liked. The third thing was, and probably equally important, is that Robert was under contract on another deal in Lake Jackson that he was working on. So he was already, it was weird. He was under contract, but he had already taken management of the property because he just had some deal worked out with the owner, and they just had a great relationship. So he already had staff in Lake Jackson, working on leasing that building and understanding the market down there. So with that expertise, it was like, oh man, you're already down there. You already know what's going on. Like, what do you think the rents can be on, with the right upgrades, which he came up with as well in terms of the CapEx and the capital improvements. Those three things kind of lined up. Obviously, like I said before, we look for grocery stores and Starbucks and Chick-fil-A's, and HEB had just opened a brand new store maybe 2 or 3 years ago, right down the street from us. So I like that if HEB was in the area, probably, we could probably be okay if we make the right upgrades. So those 4 things, I think, kind of pointed us in the right direction. The stars started to align, so to speak. And I was like, man, this is actually going to happen.
Yeah. So give us a little bit more detail. You already mentioned the location, but tell us a little bit more about that. Your first deal, how many units, what demographic it was, the class.
Gotcha. Yeah. So it's a Class C deal in a Class A- area. Maybe it's Class B area. 72 units. It's located on Oyster Creek and Highway 288, which is basically Main and Main in Lake Jackson. The demographics, it's a blue collar property. We're targeting people that work for Dow and the people that work in the refineries and people that work out of the ports. The port, I forgot the name of the port down there, Freeport. People that work in the refineries, not so much the engineers and scientists, that were the white collars, but the blue collar workers. We found that the rents were under market by $100 to $200, depending on 2 bedrooms versus 3 bedrooms. We found that they upgraded a number of the units with countertops and appliances and flooring and new kitchen cabinets, and upgraded the bathrooms. And they had some units have washer and dryer connections, and we saw that units like that were getting higher rent. So in our business plan, we said, okay, for the rest of the units, we're gonna do the same upgrades and install washer and dryer connections. And theory is we'll get the same rent increases.
Cool. So based on your experience getting that first deal, all the deals you put up an offer in and you didn't get the best and final, the ones you got the best and final and you didn't get the deal, accumulating all that experience, what would be your best advice for someone who's just starting out? Let's say someone who came to R2R for the first time or went to one of these meetups about multifamily in the last month, and they said, okay, I want to syndicate. My goal is to do it in the next year. What would be your best advice? Where to start from, or any particular advice?
I think, there's 2 things that are pretty obvious. Get educated, obviously, to know what you're doing before you get yourself and your investors in trouble. Building the team. Like I said, once we got Robert on board, everything else, like our bids got better, our offers got better, our underwriting got better. Obviously we had kind of like a mortgage broker almost in-house because of his relationship with Robert. So finding like the experienced syndicator that you could partner with, because it's very difficult for a first-time syndicator to be able to pull everything that you have to do together. I mean, even when we were under contract and we were raising money and doing due diligence, it was a lot going on. I think I had some old fashions like Clayton's having, because it's stressful. It's a lot of work. But oh man, The third part, and I think what the advice I would have given myself was, even though I was just starting out and I felt like I didn't have anything to necessarily talk about, was whoever, if you're going to syndicate, obviously you're going to raise money. Whoever you think you're going to raise money from, whoever that market is, or friends, family, colleagues, former coworkers, current coworkers, whatever, like start talking to them. As soon as you decide to be a syndicator, you need to start talking to them and explaining to them the benefits, the type of deals you're going to go after. Like I already explained, our strategy. It's kind of, we want to target properties that have like a live, work, play component, next to freeways or, major thoroughfares or whatever your strategy is, and just explain the benefits to them. We had a lot of first time investors. So it was a lot of education. I had to get educated so I could, help and, give education to folks that were, interested. But this was their first time, and maybe they didn't want to go to Artawar. They just trusted me or whatever. So the number one thing is, whoever you think you're going to raise money from, start talking to those people, and you can get a good sense whether they're interested or where you have good buy-in. So if you got 30 people, and you throw out like, hey, our typical minimum investment's $25,000, and 30 people say, yeah, I'd be interested in that. What's 30 times 25,000? I should have picked easier numbers. Man, that's $750,000. So our deal, our raise was $1.5 million, and if you're a first-time syndicator and you can bring $750,000 to someone's team that's looking to raise money, like that's incredible value. So that's, to me, that's the number one thing. Also realize like it's very difficult to be able to do all of it. So like I would either focus on raising the money or finding the deal. Kind of tough for us to be expert operators when it's your first deal, because you never operated property before, unless you've owned some other type of commercial real estate. So to me, like if I could have done it all over again, talk to people in my network that I thought would invest and really educate them and have platforms like this, so that way they could join, and it's non-pressure, because once the deal goes under contract, to try and convert someone that's never thought about investing in real estate, to get them 50% of the way to even think about investing in real estate, then the other 50% is for them to actually invest in your deal and have cash available or have money in an IRA, because or if they have it in their 401k and they're pulling it to their IRA, like all this stuff takes time. And when you're under contract, we had 60 days to close. I don't know how long y'all's due diligence was, but it was 60 days, and it's a race.
Yeah, we did 45.
45, yeah. So it's like, we don't have any time for like, hey, haven't talked to you in a while, but this is what I'm trying to do. And they're going to be like, wait, what? Like, we're just trying to understand like who you are, who's this new person? Like, you're doing what? Like, what makes you qualified to do that? These are all the questions that I got, when I talked to, the people I was trying to raise money from. But the folks that I had reached out to before that I really thought were like my warm market, but when I reached back out to them and said, hey, like I have a deal now, are you still interested? I'd like for you to be a part of this, if you find it beneficial. They were in for the cause. So, yeah.
Okay, awesome, thank you. So focusing a little bit more on underwriting that first deal, for people that's just starting to underwrite, I would say, do you have a defined set of steps that you follow to underwrite a deal? And also, do you have any special techniques or tips for quick analysis to quickly determine if something is worth taking a deeper look at or just discarding right away?
I would say that I don't think I have any tricks. I think the first thing, just because I had been in the market and bidding on deals, like I knew price points. So, if the whisper price was like 90,000 a door, I knew, okay, well, good luck finding somebody for that, but that will not be me, because I know In Houston, everything's around 74, 76 for the door, depending on exactly where you're at. So that's one quick thing. It's just like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll just cross that one out. I don't think my process is anything special. I pretty much look at the T12 and put in those numbers. You know, I look at the rent roll and put in those numbers because those help you like project what the rents could be. I'll look through the OM to see if there's like if the broker's giving me any information on value add strategies. Like, did they upgrade some of the units and the rest of these units aren't upgraded? I'll look for that. You know, I pretty much don't look at any of the pro forma that they provide just because there's just no reason to trust it. And then, you know, I'll put all that together. I'll ask Rico to pull a CoStar report, and we'll kind of look through that to see what the rent comps are. You know, there's a property down the street. Okay, what is it renting for? What do their units look like? Oh, their units are a little better than this property. Okay, well then it stands to reason that if we make the same improvements, you know, we'll be able to increase the rents to, you know, at or below what they're currently at. It comes with the job, Clayton. Sorry, I see his note there about Rico's CoStar access. And then it starts to become
it's strictly for business users, by the way.
Yes.
Only business use. So.
Only for Marcus and Millichap uses.
Exactly.
And then it starts to go back and forth. We'll send it to Robert. We'll get his team to weigh in, his team's opinion on it. See if they operate any properties in that area, if they know somebody that operates in that area, and what the rents really are, because even you may get something on a rent roll that may or may not be true. Learned that lesson as well.
Even CoStar can have like information that's not accurate, right?
Yeah, and then CoStar lags, and then people lie to CoStar all the time. Like they called me, I probably lied too, just to up like, oh no, my rents are higher. And then in our community or our program, we send everything to a coach, and then he basically just tears it apart and questions every assumption that you have, and then you have to provide backup for why you think you'll be able to implement RUBS, or why you think you'll be able to get those rent increases, or why you think the exit cap rate is what it is, or they're saying, hey, you're not going to be able to get that interest rate. You got to have a term sheet, and you have to basically back everything up with facts. And so you go around and around, and then eventually your deal gets better and better, and you're able to fine tune it and make the best educated offer that you can at the time.
Okay. So once you get to that point, that you see, okay, this is probably working out, we just have to dig deeper. What are those opportunities for improving income and decreasing expenses that you think are easier for a person that's starting out to identify?
I think the easiest one to identify is probably RUBS. It's easy to know whether the property is all bills paid, and to know if the market is supporting that or if it's supporting RUBS. Like the property that we bought, we were the last all bills paid property in Lake Jackson, where everywhere else the expectation was tenants would, pay their utilities or, be back charged their utilities. So we saw instant value in that. So we saw that other properties were instituting RUBS and had rents higher than ours, where our rents were below their rents and it was all bills paid. So there was a lot of opportunity for income growth just on those two things. On the expenses, it's harder for me to identify where expenses are like too high. That's really where we lean on our property management company. Just from working on deals with them, we learned that, okay, a property of this size is one full-time employee, and they told us how much that costs. So we're able to plug that in. Utilities, I think, naturally run higher on an all bills paid property just because tenants aren't paying for it. So if they want to run the water and make sure it's nice and warm before they get in, maybe the water runs a little longer. Maybe the lights turn on a little longer or stay on longer. We did a site visit 2 weeks ago before Thanksgiving, and we saw a lot of exterior lights were on, and it was noon. So we knew, okay, we're burning some electricity there. So maybe we could save some money on utilities just by turning the lights off. We look for water saving, strategies to replace faucets and shower heads and sinks and stuff like that. Insurance kind of is what it is. Taxes, God help us, there's no way to project that. We just hope that the county appraiser is fair. Repairs and maintenance is one area where I guess you could make some savings if you have a big CapEx budget like our deal has. We expect to basically make a lot of things brand new, so we would hope that our repairs and maintenance go down. The other thing, the property before had a high turnover. So, as people move in and move out in Lake Jackson, the city actually comes out and inspects the unit before it's leased to a new tenant, a new resident. So every time someone moved out, Lake Jackson will come out and say, oh, well, you need to replace this, you need to replace that, and you do this and do that. So they had to, the old owner, they had to keep up fixing up the property. They kept having to do make readies, where we're hoping we could, execute our business plan and get tenants in that stay for, hopefully they stay for 3 to 4 years, as opposed to people coming in and moving out frequently.
Just 5 years, right?
Just 5 years. Yes, that would be perfect. That would be perfect timing.
Municipality in Lake Jackson, they do that for everything. When people move out, I mean, what does that do for your turnaround time for when you, like, say you have somebody ready to lease it up, you're waiting on the city to come in and inspect? Like, that seems like it wouldn't scale really.
Yeah, I mean, I guess our property is it's smaller. We don't have, we're not gonna have, it's not like we're gonna have 10 units all, turning over at the same time. I don't know. It's just how the city's rules are. From the outside, when we toured the property, we were like, man, this thing hasn't been shown any love in maybe 20, 30 years. And then we walked inside, and the units were already in pretty good condition because the city kind of mandates it and makes sure that the owners are keeping it up to speed. So it's a double-edged sword. Like, man, I work in real estate development. I have cities and municipalities telling me all the time what I can and cannot do with private properties. So
that would be when you went inside and saw that the previous owner kind of had to keep up with this turnaround every time, that would have an immediate impact to your business plan and how you underwrote the deal and all that, right? So.
Yeah, we just know that it's going to take a little bit longer. If a unit goes down, we know it's going to take 2 weeks to come in and do the rehab, and then it might take another 2 weeks for the city to come out and inspect. That's where we lean on Robert's experience, because he was already in that market and he had already been through that. And he said the city of Lake Jackson loved them because of what they did at the property, that they had down the street. So I don't think, as long as you do the right thing, I think we'll be okay. Hey, I do have a question down here. Roughly by how much did your taxes and your insurance go up on closing versus the prior T12? So we actually inherited, that's probably not the right word, but we inherited the existing insurance policy. So we end up paying the exact same rate. For the taxes, we looked back 3 prior years, and the taxes paid had gone up $8,000 every year. So our first year, we actually projected $16,000 in tax increases. So it's just the best guess on taxes.
Is that a specific percentage?
Yeah, we kind of looked at it as at the appraised value being at 80% of our purchase price, and then we kept whatever their tax rate was, which in Texas is anywhere from 2 to 3%, and then we ramped up over 3 years to get to what the taxes will be or could be 3 years from now. Of course, we'll protest all the taxes that we can, but when they drive by and they see new paint and they see a playground and a dog park and maybe they watch this video. It'll be tough to argue with them, but we'll just beg for mercy.
So you started with 85% of purchase price for year one. Is that what you're underwrote?
No, I think it was it might have been 65% the first year, then 75% the second year, then 80% the third year, something like that.
Got it. And we had some questions from Clayton about the mortgage. So can you talk about how did you establish a relationship with the lender, and was that something that you already had? You leveraged RICO for? How did you find the lender, and did you shop for options, or you just went with one?
Yeah, so we went with, so when we decided to partner with Robert, Robert said, there's only one person, there's only the whole team. He was like, you can have whatever lawyer you want to draw up all the paperwork. He's like, but I want my mortgage broker working on this. So Robert, like, the mortgage broker already had all of Robert's financials. He already knew, Robert checked a lot of the boxes in terms of Fannie and Freddie. He had, already had all of Robert's paperwork for like net worth and all that stuff. So he checked a lot of those boxes. And I think Robert liked that he could pick up the phone and talk about 4 deals with one call, as opposed to, 4 different calls to talk about 4 different deals. So that was, it was kind of, Robert came with a mortgage broker. So that's, that's who we went with. Maybe in the future we'll be able to use RICO, but just not this go around.
Then did you get any particular? I mean, a lot of times you get 3 or 4 options from the broker, like, hey, this has a 5-year, there's a 7-year, there's a 10-year, this has 2 years IO, 3 years IO. How did you guys compare the packages, and why did you go with the one you decided to go with?
Yeah, I think we did get a lot of, we asked this guy for probably 12 different term sheets as the deal kind of changed. And really we just plugged them all into our spreadsheet, and we had 12 different versions of, the different underwriting, the different lender scenarios. And I think the one that we chose fit our business plan the most. In terms of the CapEx dollars that we had, we have an $800,000 CapEx budget on a 72-unit property. That's more than $10,000 a door, like in rehab. So we needed to factor that into the type of partner that we had on the debt side. So yeah, we actually went with a bridge product. Which is really what Robert pushed for. And we obviously deferred a little to his experience. We just thought, with his experience working in Lake Jackson, the rehab budget that we had, the rent projections that we had, implementing RUBS, we really thought we'd be able to increase the income of the property, and maybe change the class of it a little bit. And a bridge, it just made more sense from the amount of money we had to raise, being able to have flexibility on the back end, because had we gone in with, say a Freddie Mac or a Fannie Mae small balance loan, we were concerned about high prepayment penalties and, having to, kind of pay for it on the back end. Where, yeah, just the loan that we got, we just thought fit our business plan and fit Robert's experience.
And do you feel like you were able to already stabilize the deal, and how long did it take, and did you get any surprises implementing your business plan?
Yeah, so to answer Clayton's question, he asked if the CapEx budget was rolled into the loan. So yeah, for the bridge, they gave 75% of the purchase price, and then they gave 100% of the CapEx budget. So that was money that that we didn't have to raise. I'm on the East Coast, still need to drive home. Gotcha. Okay, have a good evening. What was your question again? Sorry, Marcelo.
No, it was more in terms of stabilization of your first deal.
Gotcha. Yeah, so for us, like I said, we have a big CapEx. One of the frustrations we are having, one of the things that I just, it's just one of the things you learn on your first go is because the CapEx is in the loan, we have to submit loan draws to the lender. And I was familiar with that from, my days at the previous development company. You get all the invoices, all the pay applications from the contractor, you put that in a package, you send that to the lender. Those contractors know that you have, it's in their contract that you have 30 to 45 days to pay. The lender funds usually on like day 42, and then you're like cutting checks and you're paying the contractors like everybody's happy. That has not been our experience. One, the contractors aren't as financially stable as the big development contractors, so they want a 50% deposit. It's like, okay, but we need to submit the loan draw for us to get that money so I can get you the deposit. So it was like this kind of a chicken and the egg kind of deal. We were able to kind of work with them once again based on having a property, like a sister or like an older brother property down the street. We said, hey, we have some CapEx issues down here. Can you work on this project? And then we'll, we're good for it on our deal. And, we're able to kind of get contractors started. So that was a bit of a learning experience. It was a lot different than, what I had been used to. I'm used to like, hey, I signed the contractor, you go out there and you do some work, and then you submit for, hey, you completed 50% of the work, well, then I'll pay you on 50%. But a lot of these contractors, they're smaller, they have to go and buy the material. It's not like they're just getting it on, on order, or not like they could pay their suppliers in arrears. So they need the money up front. So that kind of like delayed like getting the rehab started. Like we're fully underway now, but in my mind, it was like we closed September 20th. Contractors are going to be out there getting bids, and then we'll sign contracts in the middle of October. And then by the end of December, like all the rehab's done. And then January, February, March is focusing on leasing up. And that has not been our experience. So that was a learning. So the other thing is we had a chance when we closed that the lender was going to fund $100,000. Hold on. In net working capital, and for whatever reason at the last minute they end up not funding that, and that was like, hey, okay, whatever, we'll deal with it after we close. Let's just close and we'll deal with it later. But that really started to hang up our ability to move, because we closed. It took like 2 or 3 weeks for the lender to like onboard the loan into their system, then to get their their operations team on the lending side to understand what was going on. We had to send them budgets. They looked for, professional resume from Robert and his team. So it was stuff like that we had to go back and forth on. That I thought, okay, we closed. We already proved who we were to the lenders before any of this happened, and now we're going to hit the ground running. And it was we hit the ground walking, basically. I mean, we weren't able to really get moving on anything I wanted to get done until 30 days ago.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just want to open to see if anybody has any parting questions. I know we've been here for a good hour now. Anybody wants to ask any questions?
Yeah, I got one for you. So, sky's the limit. Everything's on the table. In retrospect, hindsight, looking back on it, you got to do this deal over again. What's like the top 1 or 2 things that you would change or do differently? Or like, you have this experience, you just went through it. Looking back, what are the kind of the top things that you wish you could do, you would have done differently, or choices you would have tweaked or whatever?
I think the number one thing I would have done differently is while we were under contract and in, the period before we were going to close, is start taking contractor bids before we closed. Because that whole process, if we were able to have those bids solidified and submitted that, we could have maybe submitted that at closing. So our first loan draw is at closing. So we submitted, our first loan draw ended up being $215,000. Maybe it wouldn't have been that robust if we had done it before we closed, but it could have been like I said, the $100,000, or hey, this is the amount of money to start the carpentry, or to start the playground, or to start, interior rehab, or whatever thing that we decided was the most important thing. Maybe would have been the playground from an exterior point of view, just to see a lot of activity. I would have been taking those bids, and that is what I'll do on the next deal. Like, while we're raising the money and we're closing the loan and we're jumping through hoops with the lender, we'll also start talking to our contractors and start bidding stuff out, and make sure that as soon as we close, like, okay, close, cool, here are our pay applications or our invoices or our proposals. Well, I guess it was because our capex was in with the loan, that the next deal, if we don't do it like that, and the rehab comes from equity, then we would have been able to go from the day we closed. And we didn't have a mentor that had done a bridge loan recently, I think. So we just didn't have the right strategy, I think, in terms of kicking off the rehab as soon as possible. That'd be the number one thing I'd do over.
Cool. Leah, Ian, any questions?
Hi. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yeah,
we can.
Fantastic. I just wanted to mention I am a newbie. Joined the Brad's group in March. I've been doing some underwriting, but I haven't actually found a deal yet. I liked what you said, Julius, about focusing on a specific, well, not just the asset class, or within the asset class, a specific number of units, and that way you become sort of like your own guru in knowing the market, but also the specific, you know what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I actually haven't thought of, because I've been a little bit all over the place, and that's been a hindrance in hammering down on something and solidifying a deal. So that's a good takeaway, and I just wanted to mention that. Now, in going forward with your future deals that you're working on, I'm just curious as to what key things you want to keep in mind based on where we are in the market cycle. And that's something that is of concern for everyone in this sphere. But also, I'm just curious as to what you look at specifically.
Yeah, so to your first point, yeah, when we were looking at deals about this time a year ago, Rico and I would have conversations about, like, what's going to be our advantage. Like, if we're doing the same thing everybody else is doing, how are we going to be different, and how are we going to be able to win deals? So, like, we really narrowed and really became niche, and we said, these are all only things we're going to look at, and we're going to become experts at this type of deal. So when we saw one, we were like, oh, this is what we were looking for. So to your first point, I think looking for good locations, obviously, real estate investing is some of it is predicated on the location. I think in the worst economic situations, properties that can we just keep going back to live, work, play, just because that's like what we studied in school and what we found just through our research, that we thought properties where people had easy access to employment, easy access to the freeway, easy access to retail, grocery stores, restaurants, places where they can hang out with their friends. Even our property's pretty close to a hospital, and our property's pretty close to Brazos Fort College, which is in like Jackson as well. So really just focusing on like Clayton said, like when Amazon is going to relocate, like where would they look? What were the things that, the demographics in the submarkets they would look at? Another thing we looked at that I haven't mentioned yet, we looked at the average home price in the neighborhood or in the submarket, and the average home price was $250,000, which is a pretty good, for Houston comparison. The average home sells for around $170,000 or so. So for it to be 250,000, and there are no new home subdivisions in Lake Jackson. Lake Jackson's heavily zoned. I mean, they come in and inspect your apartment, so they definitely inspect development and kind of, they have their say in what gets developed. The last multifamily property in Lake Jackson got built in 2015, and it sold recently, maybe 2 years ago, at $150,000 a door. So we were 50% below replacement costs. So those were other things where there was kind of a moat between people that could afford to buy a house. Those were probably, to be able to afford a $250 house, you got to be making so much amount of money. So there was kind of an affordability gap. It wasn't like the $150,000 home price that someone that could rent could say, well, maybe I'll buy a house. Or they were able to choose between the two. In Lake Jackson, it's not really like that. It's like, look, you either rent, or maybe you're an engineer, you're a scientist, and maybe you decide to buy a house down there, or maybe you live in Pearland, or you make the drive. So those are some things that we tried to look at to be kind of like recession proof. Just at the end of the day, if you could just hold on to like a good location, even if it was, say if it wasn't making money and it was, you were just barely getting by, at least it was a good location. That location is going to come back before, some other areas.
I had another quick question.
Thank you.
For this specific property, you guys coming in, like, what was the sub-market, opinion of this property? And did you guys take into any consideration, maybe a rebranding, or if not a rebranding, like a marketing campaign to kind of raise awareness of, what's going on in the property, new management, it's going to be kind of fresh face, and, kind of bring that up in the market? Like, what considerations are y'all taking into account with regard to, visibility and awareness, and raising the kind of the rating of the property and all that stuff as operators?
Yeah, so a little history. Like, the guys that owned it, they bought it in 2008. So they owned it for like 11 years, and they were doing other deals, and just had other interests. So their attention to this property had really, really fallen off, and they weren't pouring money back into it. Like I said, they had a high turnover rate. Just people came in, and then people just moved out, and I think that spoke to the quality of the property at the time. For us, I think once the rehab is done, then we'll really start a big marketing push. I mean, we're doing some soft marketing to Dow employees, Dow refinery guys right now. But it's probably like, it's right on Oyster Creek Drive. There's probably 5,000 cars that pass by it every day. It has a really, really dated, like 1980s paint job. We're going to do a totally new paint job, brand new entry monument. I mean, I don't know if you guys have like looked at some of my pictures on Facebook, but like that entry sign is like the bane of my existence right now. Like, it is horrible.
I just saw the big, like, the group photo, like when y'all closed on it.
And we like try to stand in front of the sign, like, so you didn't actually see it, because it was so. I think when we took that picture, it's like 2 fence posts and like a vinyl banner. It's like, oh my god, it's so terrible. So we're gonna do a new sign. We kicked off our vendor on that before Thanksgiving, so hopefully we'll be able to get that in before Christmas. Ideally, it's gonna be backlit and fits our color scheme, and it's really just gonna make it pop. We're gonna trim the trees, because there's a bunch of trees and like a public sidewalk where people run, like, right in front of our property. So we're gonna trim the trees, and the new paint job. We're also gonna build a new playground and a dog park, and where we're gonna build that's gonna be visible to the street. So I think I'm sure we will get people that are jogging down the street, and they'll look over and they will see a dog park, and they will just wander over into the dog park, and they're like, oh, this is an apartment deal too. Okay, that's cool. And then we'll probably become like a part of the community that way too. So yeah, that's kind of our strategy. Really, just like repainting it will just give it a brand new look, and people will drive by. I mean, people see it right now driving by and are like, oh, wow, it's cool. We have people that just walk in and say, hey, what's going on here? For some reason, Robert doesn't like under new management banners. I don't know. I guess he thinks they look tacky, but I don't know. I guess we'll just fix the property and people will realize that it's under.
That's because he didn't want people to read that and say, oh, the rent's going up.
Well, yeah, that's probably true too.
All right. So thanks, Junious. I think we're a little bit past the hour here, so we'll wrap things up. So I just want to remind everybody that we're typically on the first and third Wednesday of the month. Given that the first Wednesday of 2020, actually the wrong year there. Oh, nice. And so we are going to be on the second Wednesday in 2020, given that the first one is January 1st. So, but in 2 weeks, we'll be back. We'll be focusing on the passive investor side. And then again, on the second Wednesday, we'll be on from the syndication side. We're always talking every other week, so we can focus from becoming a new syndicator and also becoming a new passive investor. So I hope you guys can join us again.
Thank you for watching this week's episode of the Multifamily 0 to 1. Join us live the first and third Wednesday of every month.